Imagine a desolate, icy island in the Arctic, barely half a square mile in size. There's nothing but rocks, snow, and a bitterly cold wind sweeping across its barren surface. Yet, for nearly half a century, this tiny island became the center of a quirky, lighthearted conflict known as the Whisky War between Canada and Denmark. Today, we're diving into the hilarious and fascinating history of Hans Island, a place where bottles of liquor and flags became the weapons of choice in a very peculiar diplomatic dance. The spark of the Whisky War. Hans Island sits smack dab in the middle of the Kennedy Channel, a narrow stretch of water between Canada's Ellesmere Island and Greenland, which is politically part of Denmark. The island is so remote and inhospitable that it seems like the last place on Earth two nations would fight over. But Hans Island's strategic position within the Nares Strait, which is just 22 miles wide, put it right in the territorial waters of both Canada and Denmark. According to international law, countries have control over territorial waters extending 12 miles from their shores. So, you can see the problem. Hans Island fell within both nations' 12-mile zones. Back in the 1930s, the Permanent Court of International Justice awarded the island to Denmark, but the ruling lost its bite after the League of Nations, the court's parent organization, fell apart. Fast forward to the 1970s, and neither Canada nor Denmark had a clear claim to the island. The stage was set for a showdown, but instead of military might, the conflict unfolded with a series of good-natured, if cheeky, exchanges. A war like no other. Picture this: it's 1984, and the Danish minister for Greenland, along with a delegation, makes a trip to the icy, uninhabited Hans Island. They plant the Danish flag and leave behind a bottle of schnapps with a note saying, "Welcome to the Danish island." Not to be outdone, the Canadians soon visit the island themselves, replace the Danish flag with their own, and leave a bottle of Canadian whiskey, along with a note that reads, "Welcome to Canada." And thus, the Whisky War was born. For decades, officials and soldiers from both countries would make occasional trips to the island, swapping flags and leaving bottles of their national spirits. It's hard not to chuckle at the image of serious diplomats and military personnel engaging in what essentially amounted to a game of boozy capture of the flag. Have you ever wondered what happened to all those bottles of schnapps and whiskey? While there are no official reports, it's fun to imagine that they were disposed of in the most enjoyable way possible. After all, why let good liquor go to waste in such a harsh environment? The bigger picture. Although the Whisky War was all in good fun, there was a serious side to the dispute. Hans Island might be tiny and barren, but its location could make it strategically important, especially with the melting Arctic ice potentially opening up new shipping routes and drilling opportunities. Both Canada and Denmark had reasons to want clear ownership of the island. In 2005, tensions briefly flared when Canada's Defense Minister Bill Graham visited the island, prompting Denmark to send a naval ship. Despite this saber-rattling, the conflict never escalated beyond these symbolic gestures. The two countries managed to avoid any real confrontation, preferring to keep the dispute friendly and, quite frankly, amusing. A resolution at last. After decades of playful back and forth, Canada and Denmark finally decided to put an end to the Whisky War. In 2018, they formed a joint task force to resolve the issue once and for all. On June 14, 2022, the foreign ministers of Canada and Denmark, along with the Prime Minister of Greenland, signed an agreement to divide Hans Island between the two nations. The agreement splits the island roughly along a north-south line, giving Greenland and thus Denmark the slightly larger portion. This peaceful resolution is a testament to the power of diplomacy and cooperation, even when the stakes are as seemingly trivial as a tiny rock in the Arctic. The role of the Inuit. It's important to acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have called the Arctic home for centuries. The Inuit of both Canada and Greenland have used Hans Island and its surrounding waters for hunting and travel long before any European explorers arrived. Known as Tartupaluk, or kidney-shaped, in Inuktitut and Greenlandic, the island holds cultural and historical significance for the Inuit communities. During the negotiations leading to the 2022 agreement, the Inuit were consulted to ensure their traditional rights and access to Hans Island were respected. The Premier of Nunavut emphasized that for the Inuit, lands, waters, and ice form a singular homeland, used freely before modern political boundaries were drawn. This acknowledgement is a crucial step toward recognizing and preserving the rights and traditions of indigenous peoples in the Arctic. A legacy of cooperation. The resolution of the Hans Island dispute is more than just an end to a quirky chapter in diplomatic history. It stands as an example of how international conflicts can be resolved through peaceful means, even when they involve complex issues of territorial sovereignty. In a world often marked by violent disputes and power struggles, the peaceful division of Hans Island is a beacon of hope. Both Canada and Denmark have shown that it's possible to settle differences with humor, goodwill, and mutual respect. The story of the Whisky War might be over, but its legacy of cooperation and friendship will endure. As Danish Foreign Minister Jeppe Kofod said, "Diplomacy and the rule of law actually work." The final toast. And there you have it, the tale of the Whisky War, a unique, light-hearted conflict that brought out the best in international relations. It's a reminder that even in the realm of geopolitics, there's room for humor and humanity. So next time you raise a glass of whiskey or schnapps, toast to the spirit of Hans Island and the enduring power of peaceful resolution. Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Do you think we should have more wars like the Whisky War? And what other quirky historical events would you like to see covered in future videos? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories from around the world. Hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we post a new video. Cheers to peace, cooperation, and the curious tales of our shared history.